All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Torah studies on Parsha Ki Teitze this week. And the topic we're discussing today, why does evil exist? We have lots and lots of evil around the world, unfortunately. And the question is, why does it exist? Why does God give us this challenge of evil, that we have to fight the evil? What's the purpose of this? And this relates with the Torah portion, that we know the origin of all of the evils. We're talking about Amalek. Amalek. This is the nation that started the first fight, the first war against the Jewish people. This was right after the Jews left Egypt, with all the miracles that happened, and the world was trembling. No one dared to start up with the Jewish people after seeing all of the miracles that God defeated the empire, the superpower, which was Egypt at the time. And this nation of Amalek decided, who cares? I want to fight them anyway. The whole world was trembling. But Amalek said, I don't care. And it's not that they thought that they have a chance, that they can defeat the Jews. They knew that God is the all power. They knew that all of the miracles that happened, how God broke the Egyptians, split the ocean, the sea, and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, they said, we're going to fight them anyway. So it's like the Medrash says, it's like a very hot bath that people are afraid to go in, afraid to get burned. But once one person goes in, he cools off the bath. He cools it off. That's it. After this, it's not that the temperature became lower, but after the first one goes in, the other one follow. They can go in. So here, where everybody was scared to start up, and Amalek came and fought, that cooled off the fear that I had from Hashem, from God. And even though they knew, and even though they got there, they were defeated, they were happy nevertheless. They were happy. Why? Because they said, we showed that we can fight the Jews, that we can fight God. And this is one of the reasons that God says in this week's Torah portion, Amalek is something that we must remember constantly to erase his memory. Is a mitzvah we should hate Amalek, hate what they did, and to completely eliminate their memory from us, from under the sky. And again, the question is, why is this Amalek and all types of Amaleks throughout the generations, the Amalek of this generation, the Hitler, and all of these evil, why do they exist? Why are they here? What's the purpose? So let's see inside. In this week's Torah portion, what we read, Zacher es asher asa lacha Amalek. Remember, says the Torah, remember what Amalek did to you during your journey, shortly after you left Egypt. And the Torah goes on and says, erase the memory of Amalek from beneath the heavens. Do not forget. Don't forget to erase the name, the memory of Amalek. So Amalek, what does it mean to erase the memory? We have to remember to erase. What does it mean? So you have to remember what they did and erase everything what they represent. So one of the things we find about Amalek, as we said, is the one that cools off, which means it comes when you're talking in a broader sense, when a person is excited about God, when a person is excited about, oh, I heard there's a shul, there's a synagogue, there's a class, I want to go, let's learn about this mitzvah, let's learn about Shabbat. And you get excited about it. Amalek comes and cools off. Says, no, what's the big deal? Don't get so excited. Let's do what we need to do. Let's go to clubbing a little bit. Why are you so excited about this spirituality? So this is the idea of Amalek. When did Amalek come to us? When we were on the way from Egypt, out of Egypt, on the way to receive the Torah. In that journey, Amalek comes and breaks us off. Amalek is also, like we said before, it's the idea of putting doubts also. It says the numerical value of Amalek is 240. 240 has the same numerical, every Hebrew letter has a numerical value. Ayin is 70, Mem is 40, Lamed is 30, and Kuf is 100. So together it's 240. That's the same numerical value as the word safek. Safek means a doubt. You put in doubts to people. When you want to do something, it says, maybe not. The doubt, that's also Amalek. Another interesting thing I heard about Amalek, also it says, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Tzei ilachem ba'Amalek machar. Go out, fight Amalek tomorrow. The verse goes on, tomorrow I will stand on the hill, but the idea of pushing off things for tomorrow is also Amalek. Amalek says, you want to do something? Fine, wait for tomorrow, don't do it right now. Anyway, this is idea that we have to remember. So we have to remember to completely eliminate Amalek, the physical nation, as the Torah says. That is something that is up to mitzvah, to the Jewish armies and the kings. But the idea of Amalek is something that applies to us. So this is one type of mitzvah that we need to remember. There is another mitzvah that we know in the Torah, which is also to remember. There's a number of mitzvahs as we'll soon see. But the other mitzvah we're talking about here now is the mitzvah of remembering the day of Shabbat. To remember the day of Shabbat, to sanctify it, to make it holy. So this is, first of all, we'll read a little more about Amalek. What it says, Sefer HaChinuch, it says, God commanded us to remember Amalek. What Amalek did to us when he hurried to be the first to harm us, we are commanded to rouse our passion, to fight and hate him. We must always remember this commandment and never allow our hatred of Amalek to fade with time. It's a mitzvah to always remember to fight against him and against what he represents, to obliterate his influence. The other mitzvah of remembering is to remember the day of Shabbat. Remember the day of Shabbat, to sanctify it. What does it mean to remember the day of Shabbat? So, to sanctify it, we have to remember what the Shabbat is. It's about God creating the world, and to realize that this is, our life is from Hashem. And that is remember the day of Shabbat, and to make the Kiddush, to remember it by saying the Kiddush and so on. Now there's an interesting story with Moshe Rabbeinu, an interesting medrash actually. The medrash tells us that there was a conversation between Moses and the Jewish people. When Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jewish people about remembering, it means every day to remember what Amalek did to us, the Jewish people complained and they said, how is it possible? How can we remember Amalek and Shabbat at the same time? That's what the Jewish people complained. They felt that remembering Shabbat and Amalek was beyond them. And the question is why? Why? What's the problem? Can't remember two things. In fact, we know we have the mitzvah. There's many things we have to remember. There is what we say every morning, every day, the 6 remembrances, 6 things that the Torah says we have to remember. According to some opinions, there's even 10. And there's also 6 other mitzvahs that are considered constant mitzvahs that we need to remember constantly. So here, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Jewish people complained. Moses, our teacher, one passage reads, remember what Amalek did to you. Another passage reads, remember the day of the Shabbos to sanctify it. How can both prevail? And again, that's what we need to understand. What is the problem? What is the problem that the Jewish people have, which they say that it's a problem to remember 2 things? What's the problem? So here is the mitzvahs that are 6 constant commandments. 6 constant commandments that we may not forget for all of our lives, for even a moment. And they are A, to believe in God, B, to reject all other deities, C, believe in God's unity. What does it mean, God's unity? Meaning that everything else that exists in the world is nothing else but God. That means the whole entire world is godliness. God, everything comes from God, which means everything is godly. And nothing has its own existence. Then we have D, to love God. Then to fear God. Then we have F, the 6th one is to resist the temptations of our hearts and eyes. So those are 6 things that we have to constant mitzvahs, okay? So apparently we have much more than just the 2 mitzvahs to remember. In addition to that, we have the 6 remembrances. To remember our exodus from Egypt, that God took us out of Egypt. To remember the revelation at Sinai, that God gave us the Torah at Mount Sinai. 3, to remember Amalek's attack on Israel, what we're discussing today. 4, the golden calf and the rebellion in the desert. When the Jews rebelled, we need to remember that. 5, the Miriam's negative speech and punishment when she was punished by becoming a leper, when she spoke against Moses. And number 6, to remember the day of Shabbos. So those are 12 things we have to remember, and that the Jews apparently did not have a problem with. But when it came to Amalek and Shabbat, all of a sudden they say, "Oh no, that's too much. We can't figure it out. That's too much." And then we need to understand also what did Moses answer the Jewish people? First of all, we need to understand the question, the problem that the Jewish people have. Then, what did Moses say to them? He said to them as follows. Moses replied, "You can't compare a goblet of wine, of fine wine, to a cup of vinegar. They are both cups. This is a cup of to observe and sanctify the Shabbos, and that is a cup to destroy and uproot the descendants of Amalek." So what exactly is Moses answering? Is saying, The Jews complain, they say we can't remember both Shabbos and Amalek, the two things that are, it's too much to remember both of them. And Moshe Rabbeinu is telling them, well, this is a cup of wine and this is a cup of vinegar. We know that. We know that Shabbos is good and Amalek is bad. So what exactly is he telling us by saying that this is a cup of wine and this is a cup of vinegar? So to understand this, and the short answer is that Shabbos and Amalek are not just two different things. They are really polar opposites. And that's what the Jews they had a problem with. What is Shabbos? Shabbos represents, as we said before, the idea that everything is God. 6 days of creation. The week is a week of 7 days. The week begins with Sunday. How do you say Sunday in Hebrew? Yom Rishon, first day. There's no names for the days of the week. Every day, every week, it's a new cycle, which, by the way, also scientifically, there's no explanation why is a week 7 days. There's explanations why other periods of time, the month, the year, but 7 days a week, could be 6, could be 7, could be 9, could be 8. Why 7? It is because God created the world in 6 days, and the 7th day he rested and made a holy day to sanctify, to resume, to return to yourself, to return to the godliness. That is why we sanctify that day, just as God did. That is the ultimate recognition that we are not alone. Now, we are not ourselves. We are not self-made men and self-made women. We are here because God put us here, and he blesses us, and he gives us the blessing through the Shabbos, through the holy day of Shabbos. That's what we are experiencing. That is what the Shabbos is all about, the recognition in Hashem, the recognition in God. What is Amalek? Amalek is the total opposite. Amalek is the one who denies God. The one who recognizes, he knows exactly what God is, but he chooses to rebel and go totally against God, against the Jewish people. This is what Amalek is. So those two things are total, complete, polar opposite things. This is like the wine and this is like the vinegar, as we'll soon get back to this. Here comes the Baron Alevi, the Sefer HaChinuch says as follows. This is a commandment talking about the Shabbos, to remember the greatness of this day, and to fix faith in creation in our hearts. As the Torah states, remember the Shabbos to sanctify it. For God made the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. We sanctify it over a cup of wine, says the Chinuch. Why? Because it is human nature to be aroused by wine, as it satiates and causes joy. Says the Chinuch, I have often explained that our inspiration is more permanent when we translate it into physical acts. Thus, our sages taught in Talmud that those who prefer bread over wine sanctify the Shabbos over bread, for we are each aroused by the things we crave. So this is the reason why we make the blessing on the wine. We want to connect that remembering of Shabbos with something physical, and something physical that brings us joy, that arouses us. And this is the idea of the mitzvah of Shabbos, to implant this idea of God creating the world and resting on the holy day of Shabbos. Shabbos is meant to remind us that we are not the masters of our destiny. We are always in God's hands, and He alone is our constant creator. As we say every day by davening, we say, in His goodness, God constantly renews the work of creation each day. And as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, not only each day, every moment. As the Baal Shem Tov says, every moment God recreates the world, every second. So, because if God wouldn't recreate, we wouldn't be here. What does God need to do to destroy the world? Nothing. If it does nothing, the world is not here. And that is the opposite of what Amalek is all about. Amalek had a different attitude. Our sages of blessed memory described him as one who knows his maker, his master, and deliberately rebels. Amalek was impudent, chutzpahdik. That's the word for chutzpah. He did not lack knowledge of God. On the contrary, he knew and recognized God's greatness. Nevertheless, he refused to be intimidated. His impudence and audacity drove him to reject God without reason or justification. Like impudent people who know they are inferior, yet stand up brazenly to powerful and righteous people. There are some people like that. So the Amalek of all generations are someone who fights against Hashem, fights against God. Who was the descendants of Amalek? Haman. We celebrate in Purim, the one who wanted to destroy the people. In our generation, the closest one is the Nazis, Yamach Shemam. So I want to read from an article. During the Holocaust, there was an underground newspaper that was written, and that in this article, this is from Yad Vashem, a call in the Midbar, from Agudat Israel, underground newspaper, from Yad Vashem archives. Amalek and Haman are targeting the Jews less as a people than as a divine people. Therefore, their war is directed mainly against the God of Israel. They object to His Torah. They are uncomfortable with God, who sees everything and demands an accounting for wrongdoings. These things are not to the Amalekites' liking. They don't want them. They therefore wish to destroy the Jewish people who stand for perfect faith in the God of Israel. This is why God's name and throne cannot be complete as long as Amalek exists. Consequently, we must never forget what Amalek did to us and what he continues to do to fight against God. So our question is now, what does it mean? We need to remember that, yeah? To remember, what does it mean to remember? Just to remember that something happened? Just to register in my mind? No. Remember means something deeper. Remembering is not just about having a surface awareness of a concept. It is about reliving and re-experiencing until the memory comes to life. There's a story that was told the Frierdiker Rebbe told the story. And the story about a soldier, he says, talks about a soldier of in the time of the Tsar. Friedrich Rebbe in general was very much, his descriptions was really amazing. Describing pictures, like he had wrote the memoirs. In any case, the story goes about this soldier that describing his experience in the army and seeing he first described to his friends. He described to his friends about the ranks in the army. You have the sergeant, you have the division general, you have the brigade commander, you have the army chief, and the minister of war. And he says, when the army chief, when the sergeant has to see is being summoned by the division general, he starts shaking. He's very fearful. When the division general is summoned by the brigade commander, also it describes each level. The brigade commander, when he's summoned by the army chief, he's really, really shaking, really fearful. And when the army chief is summoned by the minister of war, well, he's scared to death. And when the minister of war is summoned by the Tsar, the fear is off the charts. And that's how he describes to his friends. And you can see the fear that he has as he's describing those ranks. And then he says, and imagine if that simple soldier is sent to the sergeant, to the division general, to the brigade commander, all the way to the Tsar. Imagine what kind of fear he would have. And when he said that big muscular soldier fell on the floor and fainted. And the Frierdiker Rebbe explained, he says, this is what it means to remember. This is what it means to remember. To remember is to relive your experience. To remember is you remember Shabbos. To remember Shabbos is you relive that experience of godliness, that Hashem is here, that we are every moment, we are being created with Hashem. And the same thing is to remember Amalek. What is to remember Amalek? Is total opposite. To relive the experience of what Amalek is. That Amalek is total against God. And this is why the Jewish people had a problem. These two things, they said to Moses, wait a second, how are those two remembrances possible simultaneously? How can we, at the same time, living the experience of Shabbos, and at the same time, living the experience of remembering Amalek, to go through into their world, the world of Amalek? So now we understand the problem that the Jews had. And what is the answer? What does Moshe Rabbeinu say to them? The answer that he gives them, he tells them, those two are two cups. This is a cup of wine and a cup of vinegar. What's the answer? So wine and vinegar. Wine and vinegar are not so different after all. Yes, wine is delicious and vinegar is disgusting, but they are from the same family. What is the wine coming from? What is the vinegar coming from? From wine. Webster Dictionary. Vinegar, definition, a sour liquid obtained by fermentation of dilute alcoholic liquids. But most commonly comes from wine. In fact, also they say vinegar comes. The vin comes from wine, and the agar means acidic. But when you have the wine turns acidic, that becomes vinegar. So there's a little description of the website everwonderwine.com. It says the process. So what happens when a bottle of wine turns to vinegar? Without getting into all the technical details, the wine has simply gotten infected with a bacteria. This bacteria occurs naturally in the air and on fruit. This leads to acidic acid building up in the wine in combination with too much exposure to oxygen. When this happens, you'll immediately notice that your wine will take on a sharp vinegar smell that's also been described as being like nail polish remover. Okay? What is Moshe saying? What is Moses telling the Jews by telling them that Shabbos is like wine and Amalek is like vinegar? What he's telling them is that they should know that just like wine and vinegar, they both come from the same source. They both come from the vine. They come from the vine, from the grapes. They come from the same source. Not only from the vine, it comes from the wine itself. The same thing is also Shabbos and Amalek. The holiness of Shabbos comes from Hashem. Amalek is also, the root of Amalek is in God as well. But it's God, the godliness, that he went acidic, became sour. What does that mean? How could God become sour? God forbid, obviously we have to understand what we're talking about. Says the Rebbe. When we examine the concept of Amalek from the perspective of Jewish mysticism, we discover that Amalek, represented by vinegar, is also rooted in holiness. How can anything deliberately rebel against God if there is none beside him? It is only possible because there is nothing that God cannot do. You see the point? The point here is that when you want to experience holiness, you think about Shabbos. You remember Shabbos? Everything God. God created everything. But what is God? What is God capable of? To say that God is capable of creating this world, that's only seeing God in our frame, a frame of mind. The amazing thing here with Amalek, with the fact that God is able to create something that negates God, that is only because God is the all capable. God is not limited to the limitations of this world. God can take a square and turn it into a circle, and it remains a square. It's not in our world. It's not in our mind. It's not in our understanding. God can make 2 + 2 = 5. Again, it's not in our world. One of the examples is shown in the Holy Temple. In the Holy Temple, there was the Holy Ark, the Ark that housed the tablets that God gave, the tablets of the Ten Commandments. And that Ark, our sages tell us, had a certain measurement, 2.5 cubits, but it was placed in the center of the room of the Holy of Holies. And when they measured the room, it was 20 cubits. And when they measured from each side of the ark, which was placed in the center, and was 2.5 cubits, and each side was 10 cubits. Cubit is about 1.5 feet. Can you explain it? No, because it's God. It's beyond our understanding, beyond our capabilities of understanding. So Amalek represents the one who goes against God. The fact that you're able to have something going against God is because of that God is capable of allowing something like this to exist. And the purpose of this is for us to remember to do what? To eliminate it. Because ultimately we need to prove it brings in us, within us, it takes out within us a tremendous power, a power of understanding that God is beyond our understanding and beyond our world. And God is capable, in fact, to create this Amalek, and the purpose is for us to deny it and to destroy it. And thereby recognizing that there too, it was always God. That the place of Amalek was always God. And this is the idea, what we see also in vinegar. Vinegar, our sages explain, has two elements to it, two aspects. On the one end, vinegar, they say it restores the soul. A person is like in faint. When you give him a boost of vinegar, it can wake him up. Yet, it is considered spoiled wine. It's not a good thing in that sense. Yet, it's used for other good things, but that itself is spoiled wine. So Amalek indicates that God is omnipresent even in the face of evil. So on the one hand, the vinegar is chaymetz meishivus hanefesh, it restores the soul. But yet on the other hand, it says when a food item spoils, this is a law in Shulchan Aruch, when a food item spoils, the blessing recited before eating it must be altered. Rather than chanting a blessing for this particular food category of wine, we recite the blessing that encompasses all food groups. Shakol niya bidvaro, that his word made all. When wine goes to vinegar and becomes so acidic that people refrain from drinking it, the blessing for it should one drink it? I don't know who's going to drink it, not me, but someone drinks it, he makes a bracha, is shakol niyah b'dvaro, it changes the blessing. What does it mean that it changes the blessing? That the vinegar changes. It's no longer wine. It's something different and something, it was ruined, it was spoiled. And this is the message. There's a value to his acid because it is only through his acidic rebellion that we discover the true extent of God's omnipresence and omnipotence. The ultimate power of Hashem we can see only when we see the opposite, when we see the evil, when we break the evil. And this is what the Rebbe explains here. This, Moses implied all this by saying a cup of wine cannot cannot be compared to a cup of vinegar. Shabbos and Amalek are both cups through which we are filled with the revelation of sacred godliness. Because Amalek is also rooted in holiness, just like vinegar is rooted in wine. However, the two cups are not equal. The Shabbos cup urges us to observe and sanctify, while the Amalek cup urges us to punish. By remembering Shabbos, we reveal God's omnipresence on earth. Remembering Amalek doesn't reveal God's presence on earth. Only when we punish, because why? Because Amalek negates God. He rebels against God. Only when we punish Amalek, crush and obliterate all movements that aim to rebel against God, is God's true omnipresence revealed. Thus, vinegar is an apt metaphor for Amalek. When we obliterate Amalek, the cup of vinegar is revealed. And as a medium that restores and revitalizes our soul, this is because remembering to destroy Amalek demonstrate that Amalek's existence derives exclusively from God's unlimited omnipresence. That's what Amalek is for. That's what Amalek is all about. What is the lesson we take from this? The lesson is quite simple. Maybe not so simple, but when we encounter evil, what is the message for us? The message for us is to obliterate the evil. That doesn't mean you have to go out fighting. To obliterate the evil within you, within yourself. When there is things in the world, we have to bring the light. We have to show the goodness, the kindness, what Hashem has in this world. When we have the Amalek, as we said before, what is Amalek? It's rebelling against Hashem. So when you have a sense of rebelling, when you have a sense of having doubts, when you have a sense of getting cold feet, realize that this is something that comes from Amalek. What is the purpose of this? The purpose of this is for you to obliterate it, for you to overcome it. And how do you overcome this kind of opposition to God? It is to do exactly the opposite of Amalek, which, as we said, it goes beyond reason. It's not that it makes sense what is fighting. It's just fighting without reason. Putting doubts, making cold, giving you cold feet. We have to go without reason on the opposite side. So this is what the evil is here for us to realize that even that thought is also with God's permission. God allowed this to be. And the reason for him to allow it to be is for us to make us stronger, to be able to overcome this Amalek. That is true with the general Amalek and with the individual Amalek. And we'll see the key points from this lesson. So we see, number one, to remember something in its truest sense. To remember something in its truest sense, what does it mean to remember? Is to relive the emotional experience, whether trauma or joy. Shabbat, you relive Shabbat. Remembering Shabbat is to relive what it means. Remembering Shabbat entails living inside the moment of creation. Subsumed by God's omnipresence, remembering Amalek includes living inside the rebellion against God. You're relieving inside, but for the purpose of eliminating it. The two can only be relieved simultaneously because both communicate the same point. Shabbat declares that God is the true master, who is omnipotent and omnipresent. Amalek declares that God is omnipresent even in the face of evil. Even there, it's only from Hashem. Remembering Amalek is not enough. We must remember to fight Amalek until he is crushed. Only then is the full scope of God's omnipresence revealed. Evil exists only to demonstrate God's omnipresence in the face of evil, which is why we fight evil wherever we find it and why we can always overcome it, because ultimately it is Hashem. So Hashem gives us the power to overcome it. So here it is. There was once Alan Dershowitz wrote that he said he once had the chutzpah to write, in the worst sense of the word, he writes, to write an arrogant letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson. And it says, I had read in the newspaper that the Lubavitch movement was honoring Jesse Helms. And there was no man in America I despised more than Jesse Helms. As chairman of the Senate, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he absolutely stood for everything that I was opposed to in those days, including being strongly anti-Israel. So he writes, I wrote a letter saying, in essence, how can you honor a man who stands for everything that is opposed to Jewish values in America? And I received a letter back from the Rebbe, a very, very respectful letter, a letter that I cherish for its content. And he lectured me, but in a very nice way, telling me that you never give up on anybody. You never, ever give up on somebody. And he continues, he says, today, Jesse Helms may be against Israel. That's what the Rebbe continues. Today, Jesse Helms may be against Israel, but tomorrow, if we know how to approach him and speak to him, maybe he will turn out to be a champion of Israel. And I have to tell you, says Alan Dershowitz, I had my doubts about it, but as they say, the rest is history. Although I still disagree with Jesse Helms on many issues, when it comes to Israel, he has become our champion. So not to say that Jesse Helms was Amalek, but in essence, everything in what we have, everything that comes with the oppositions that we have, is always, it should be only with seeing the purpose of it. There's a purpose for everything. Things we can turn around, things that we cannot turn around, is there for us to fight, and by fighting we strengthen our own strengths. And ultimately, it says the world will be completely, the ultimate evil will be eliminated, and that will lead to the coming of Mashiach very soon. Amen. Thank you. Any questions? Any comments? More than happy to take.